The DIESOL podcast,
Developing Innovation in English as a Second or Other Language.
episode 75, Flippity Tools in ESOL.
Welcome to DIESOL. This is episode 75. We are your hosts. I'm Brent Warner.
And I'm Ixchell Reyes. Episode 75.
I know, it feels kind of landmarky, right?
I know. 75. We'll only need 25 more.
On the assumption that 100 is another landmark for us.
We have listeners by 100.
Yeah, we'll have. Hey, if we can get 3 listeners by the time we get to 100, we're good to go. No, we've been doing all right. People are
Happy December.
Yeah, people are still listening to the show.
Yes, they are.
That's all nice. So
yes, they are.
Yeah, happy December. Ixchell, last time you said you were going to go to New York. How'd that go?
I did not go to New York.
Yeah, so there you go.
So there you go.
Instead,
I went to Rhode Island, explored it. It was interesting. I love visiting historical places, and there's so many plantations there. The name itself was Rhode Island and the Providence Plantations. It has the longest name in all of the states.
Oh.
And also it has the shortest state motto. You know what their state motto is?
Come here.
Hope.
Hope. Oh, okay, good.
Hope.
Okay.
So that's cool. And then, so H.P. Lovecraft is right there. And
why do I feel like Rhode Island has to have all of these like special little trivia facts about it, because otherwise it gets overlooked?
Oh, wait. Guess what the first thing I did was I drove up to the real house from the that inspired the Conjuring series.
Oh, you're doing stuff that I would have done, like H.P. Lovecraft.
Yeah,
and
it's like from
horror
1600s.
houses.
Yeah, it was awesome, and it was cold, and it was like the perfect place. Like if you needed to go find a dead body, it'd probably be there because there's a lot of trees and like.
Do you think
lakes
any
or water
phantasms like latched onto you and followed you back home to Texas?
I did make some spirit friends.
Oh, okay. I'll let you save that story for another day, I suppose.
Yeah. How was your Thanksgiving?
It was all right. It was kind of quiet. So yeah, we spent a little time with my dad, and overall, it's one of those times where you're like, oh yeah, these 4-day weekends are pretty sweet.
Yeah, and last year I didn't spend it with my family because I was overseas, and this year I didn't want the rush of having to juggle different family events, and I just needed time.
Yeah, it happens. So we all need a little bit more time, and here as we're settling into December and the end of the year, hopefully we can relax a little bit, and hopefully today's episode helps get you back a little bit of time if it helps out. So let's jump over. All right, so Ixchell, today I kind of proposed that we might talk a little bit about not a new tool for a lot of tech teachers, but one that doesn't get talked about a lot in our field, I don't think, which is Flippity at flippity.net.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I was going to say, so flippity.net we used during the pandemic, and I was surprised at how many people would look it over because it's a very simple page when you get there. And then you brought it up today, and we went in there to explore more, and a lot of they've added more tools, and they've simplified. I think it probably gained a little bit of a new audience with the pandemic, so I think it's a great topic to explore a little more.
Yeah.
And you always know about these tools. So
sometimes recently I don't feel so much.
It.
I mean, but yes, I did. This one actually, when we had John Carippo on the show, we talked, I think, a little bit about this, and then I had written a blog post that was called the Power Emoji Power Paragraph a couple of years ago. So I think before we get into what that is, just kind of for people who don't know what Flippity is, essentially it is a website where you can go and get Google Sheets. So then the Google Sheets can be converted into these kind of basic games or activities or other things. So I think the easiest way for us to think about it for TESOL teachers is let's just start with the conversation around vocabulary. So if you have like vocabulary lists or something like that, you plug them into a spreadsheet and then it can turn it into all sorts of different games, right? We'll go through a list of all the different things briefly, and then we'll kind of jump into a few of them in depth. But I just want to kind of give a sense of, it's like, oh, I don't have access to a bingo game, or I have to go sign up and do all this stuff to make a Jeopardy game work. And what it does is it really simplifies that entire process, because it will automatically pull in from a spreadsheet. So if you've just got the right things in the cells that you want, then you don't have to deal with all the formatting and clicking things one at a time and doing all that type of information. So that's kind of what Flippity is. Ixchell, why do you like it?
I like it for the fact that you don't need to have an LMS or any kind of account. I mean, sure, if you're going to create a template, you'll use a Google account because it's going to be using Google Sheets. But if you needed something quick and dirty, you could just head to the page and enter your information or whatever data you're looking at, and then it'll just convert it into that activity. Mm-hmm. And recently, one of my colleagues was looking for a Jeopardy template, and she didn't want to have to build one on PowerPoint. And so this would just automatically get rid of that, because the code is already there and you just have to enter your information.
Yeah.
I also like that there within the tools, there are some that can be used as gap fillers. So if you've got those 10 minutes at the end of class that you need to do some kind of quick informal assessment, or you want to at the beginning do some kind of warm up, you could use some of these in combination with others. They're all on one page. You could even have students, if you have student leaders or group leaders, depending on how your setup is. I know that not all onto-one devices. So if you, so you could have a class leader who's going in and typing something in for everybody to see. So it's a lot. It's very student friendly and teacher friendly too. Because I know that sometimes when I try to explain, well, you could build this on Sheets or on Excel if you're using, the Microsoft Suite, people get scared of all of the coding and the different functions. And so this is just, it's there. It's easy. It's pretty quick setup.
Yeah, I'd even say that if you're the type of person who's kind of afraid of spreadsheets, or like, I don't know all that math and the formulas, this is actually a pretty good way to kind of dip your toes into it a little bit, because really all you're doing is, typing letters into a cell, or possibly making a link to an image or something like that. But it's very low barrier to entry. Obviously, when you look at a spreadsheet, it's like, okay, all these
it's overwhelming. It can be overwhelming.
Things, and you start looking at it. But I think the way that they set it up, and they give you these template spreadsheets if you wanted to follow along with what they're doing and just kind of make your own version. I will say that it is a much lower barrier to entry for teachers who think that they're not techie, but it's actually fairly straightforward and really well organized once you get into those fundamental spreadsheets.
And I think, Brent, I think it's worth mentioning that if we have listeners overseas where you may be somewhere where you don't have access to an LMS or anything like that, this is, again, this is a great place to start if you want to have a little bit of even gamification to what you're doing in the class. But just because it's simple doesn't mean that it stops there, because I think you can probably talk about how to customize, or where else we can go with these.
Yeah. So we'll get into some of that as we talk through some. Just a couple of quick hints before we really talk about some of these specific tools. Number one, I do recommend that you might look at these tools on the website on flippity.net and go, oh, well, I don't really see how that works, right? So I'm not going to use that at first glance. And so sometimes it's worth going into the spreadsheet itself, and you can see how customizable it is, right? And so we'll talk about this a little bit with some of these, but for example, if you're doing the timeline tool, right, it's kind of set up to do it by year, but you could set it up with all sorts of different things that you're that you're going to have your students play around with. So they might do things that are not necessarily a timeline, but something sequential, right? So you could be playing around with like cardinal numbers and sequential ordering, and say things like first, second, third instead of 1995 or whatever years you're doing. So I just want to point out that you can manipulate the spreadsheet, which would manipulate the game itself, right? And then the second part, some of these are actually easy enough where students can go fill in a Google form, and then you on the back end could just copy and paste what they put into their Google form, which turns into a spreadsheet, and you can align that with the Flippity spreadsheet, right? So you could actually have students create a lot of the content for whatever activity you're doing by having them fill out a Google form, and then you just plug that right into your interactive activity, so that then it's all based on student-built content instead of maybe yours. So there's a few ways to play around with this, lots of things to get into, but Ixchell, before we even start, we just need to go through a quick list of all of the tools, very briefly as we can.
Because there's 28 of them.
Geez, that's a lot. Yeah, it's a lot to explore. So let's just quickly go back and forth. Is that how we want to do it? Okay. So first up is flashcards. That's what it means.
Then we have flex cards.
Yeah. We have a quiz show. So that's kind of a Jeopardy equivalent.
A random name picker, self-explanatory.
And a randomizer, which we'll talk about more in depth. So that's like gives lots of different, spinning wheels at the same time, or that will pick out resources.
Virtual Breakout, which I'll explain later.
You can build a board game right into it.
There's something fascinating called manipulatives.
And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. They're kind of your standard. So if you're building with some lower level students, possibly, you can do a matching game. So you can put in those pictures and, flip cards like that.
There's a Connect Though game, which is a Connect 4 type template.
Yeah. There's also a bingo game, so very straightforward.
Timeline, which Brent mentioned a little bit.
There's also a badge tracker, so if you wanted to make customized badges for your class without going into a whole badging system, you could do that.
And for keeping track of different things, you have a leaderboard.
You also have a typing test, so depending on the digital skills you're working on, that might be useful.
Spelling words.
Got a couple of traditional ones, so we've got a word search.
And a crossword puzzle.
And a word scramble, so that's the ones where it just gives you the letters and you have to rearrange them into the name of the right word.
And then you have the better named Snowman game, which I think is a updated version of Hangman, the traditional and outdated Hangman.
Yeah. There's one called Wordmaster that's kind of like a Wordle type of game.
There's a progress indicator.
There's also a traditional word cloud option.
There's fun with fonts.
Yeah.
Different types of fonts, hopefully not Comic Sans.
No. What it does, that one, we're not going to talk about it very much, but it, it'll put in whatever you type in, like a block font or like kids' toys blocks or images that kind of become the fonts. There's also a Mad Libs activity.
A tournament bracket.
A certificate quiz.
And a self-assessment.
All right. So we cannot talk about all of these, Ixchell. And so I feel a little bad because we might skip over some of these just kind of in breaking them down. But we are going to encourage everyone to go in and look. And of course, if you're already using some of these, come leave us some comments on the show notes about how you might use them. If you want to share and add a little bit of information, we would love to see, because we're going to talk about, maybe eight or 10 or something of these as we go on, but I don't think we're going to really get into the full depth that all of these could value from. So Ixchell, let's get a couple in here. You want to start?
Yeah.
Which one are you looking at?
I think flex cards.
Okay.
I think flex cards is the one that they didn't have before during the pandemic, and if they did, I skipped over it, because flex cards is I guess they're like flashcards, but there are 10. You describe them as a 10-sided flashcard.
Yeah, well, that's
which
what
I
it says right
like.
on the website. So,
Oh,
so
well,
I stole that
I
from them.
skipped over that. So each flashcard has a topic, and then you can have subtopics or other areas that are covered. So let's say you were doing um, landmarks. You could have, then the next side of the flashcard would be people born there. And then you could have like, I don't know, things that are grown there. You could also have former names of the place. And so again, 10 different facts or areas to explore. So flex cards are they're not as linear as what PowerPoint would be, or oh my gosh, I'm blanking out on the Google Suite.
Google Slides.
How can I slides slides? Oh my gosh, slides.
Yeah.
So it's like it's pretty cool.
It is cool because basically, yeah, the 10-sided flashcards. So you can kind of imagine almost like you have a bunch of, 3x5 flashcards taped together almost in a circle, and you're just kind of twisting it to look at a different thing for each one, right? But then when you move to the next card, you can have those same categories. So it's kind of like columns and rows, but it's pulling all of these things. And same thing too is like you can put in videos. So you could put in YouTube videos in here. So if you're doing those landmarks, you might find like, a first timer's guide to the Washington Monument, or like something like that on YouTube, right? And so I think that would be really cool and a good way to it's almost, you could turn it into like a graphic organizer for students.
Yeah,
and
that's what I'm
this is the category
envisioning
you're
now.
doing for this part, right? Yeah, so there's a lot of cool things that you could play with, and then again, putting the impetus of the work back on the students to create and share information, and then you all have a collective big group of different flashcards that can teach you things. One thing I was thinking about, Ixchell, as you were showing that and talking about it, was character analysis of a novel, right? And so you could assign different groups of students different characters, and then as they're going through, they're filling out the information week by week about like, oh, what are we seeing? What's their personality like? Okay, how are they changing after the big event? Okay, maybe draw a picture and upload it, and what does that character maybe look like in your head, or something like that, right? So you could do all sorts of interesting things there.
What have you got?
So next up, mine is, I'll start with the randomizer, because that was the big blog post that I did a couple of years ago for the Power Emoji Power Paragraph. So basically what the randomizer does is you can choose the spinning wheel, right? But the randomizer can really let you do these whole columns and rows of different content. So if you think of a random name picker as you think of the spinning wheel, right, where it just picks one choice, this will have different categories. And so you could have, like the one that they have on their demo version is like they have a who column, a what column, a when column, and a where column. And then you can have a bunch of different content inside of those. So when they spin the wheel, and I kind of think of this for those of you who are in the States, if you're thinking of what is that game? Why am I thinking?
Categories.
No, The Price is Right. The Price is Right. When when they go and spin the giant wheel to choose their number. So it's kind of like those with like 4 of them right next to each other. And then it's like, okay, then all 4 of those will be combined to turn into something, right? So what you can do is you can put in emoji as your choices there, right? And so then when a student comes up and spins, then they're going to get 4 different emojis in a row, or 5 different emojis in a row, or something like that, and they'll be able to then, you could do like the storytelling thing, right? So they have to make a story out of those 4 that have showed up. Like I said,
journal prompts, right? Yeah,
you could do all sorts of interesting prompts, and you could kind of say like, okay, some of them, you could also mix and match, right? So it doesn't all have to be emoji. You could do like, hey, some of these are going to be like concepts, and then some of these are going to be concrete ideas, and you're going to show us how you're going to mix these ideas together, etc. So there's lots of ways to possibly play around with it, right? You might say, like, you might have it try to build a sentence and then have students figure out, like, hey, what might be missing in this sentence or what might be wrong. So you could put in, like, you could have subject, verb, object, right? But maybe your verbs are all in the dictionary form, and you're asking students to then turn these sentences into a different verb form for the sentence, right? So simple ways to play or more complex ways. I think there's a lot of things to play around with that randomizer.
Another one that I don't believe they had before that it's I just want to try out right away is a virtual breakout, which is like your digital or virtual breakout room.
Mm-hmm.
And they've got locks. So there are 7 locks, and I think you can customize how many options, or maybe, but either way, you can customize what questions are asked in order to break the lock open. And I can just imagine this would be so much fun to have with small either pairs or groups where they're solving a puzzle, and it could be like, okay, take a look at this video clip from YouTube. Here's a quote. Who said that famous quote? And then whatever their answer is, they type in the answer, they unlock it, they go on to the next room, sort of, or the next lock that they have to break. And there's a lot of ways you can have just a really simple version of this, or you can customize. So if you want students to answer in sequential order and lead up to a bigger, the last question, you can do that. Or there's so many things you can do. So I can already think of ways for them to just activities that they could do together.
Yeah, so for sure. And one of the things, like, I know that a lot of people were into the breakout things, and then, I mean, frankly speaking, I think a lot of people kind of got paywalled out of Breakout EDU.
Because it's expensive.
Yeah, it costs money, and it usually costs teachers their own money. And so this is a thing that you can do, like, for free and have your own digital version of it.
And then I think that as teachers are playing around with some of these tools, though you're doing it on flippity.net, it could easily transfer to something that you're doing physically with the students later with just paper. So sometimes you get the idea for, like, oh, hey, I tried it out virtually. I didn't have to create all this paper stuff, but now I realize how well it works, and I want a more hands-on version of it. So now I can so it's like you can demo things with it, and I could see that. Without having to spend all that money.
I love that. Like, that's a great way, because you might end up, okay, well then I'm gonna go buy the card stock, and are they really gonna want to play this?
Yeah,
like all that stuff.
And maybe you really want to, you really want to get into it. And I feel like, oh my gosh, if you had, after you've been trying it around a few times, you can say, oh, I could see that we could do this as the midterm activity that we always do. And it's like the lead up to it. And now you can have the demo versions online, and then you have like the one that you have in class. So I could just see myself having a lot of fun with a breakout room or a virtual breakout.
Oh yeah, for sure. Okay, so next up, maybe before we take a quick break, I'm going to do this last one, which is the Connecto, which is kind of a Connect 4 type or tic-tac-toe type game, right? The reason that I chose this one is because it, obviously just like dropping tokens into a slot doesn't really do anything. But the way that this game works is very simple question answer, right? And so you can project it on the screen, and you can have people be on different teams or whatever it is. So you could have, team A, or the black tokens and the red tokens or whatever. But I like that it's kind of simple and straightforward. So in the spreadsheet, you just have questions in column A and answers in column B, and then it's going to pull from that. And so what you can do is project this in front of the whole class. It'll bring up a question, right, whatever that question is, and then the student has to answer it correctly. But they would have chosen, hey, I want this, I want the they're done by columns and rows. So column A and row 6, for example, right, all the way down at the bottom, and they're going to choose one that's available to them. The question will show up. They'll have a chance to answer. So really, I mean, very, very straightforward question and answer, repeat and review with the class, but a quick, slightly different version of the game where they can play a tic-tac-toe thing and line themselves up. And so you can play around with all sorts of different little ways to manipulate that. You could put in audio into some of these. You could put in, videos as, prompts to get them going with ideas. So there's a lot of fun things. And of course, you can just have a simple, straight text prompt as well.
Students will go crazy for this kind of competition just to earn the chance to possibly block the other team from creating the Connect 4 or whatever it is. They will.
Yeah, for sure. And I wonder, I'd have to play with it a little bit more. I think you could even go back in and have maybe more than 2 teams, possibly. So,
different colors.
Yeah, possibly with different colors. And that would get real hard real fast. I don't I don't know if students could actually get themselves to pass each other, but maybe you could do like a different version where you said, hey, if you make a connection on 2 sides, so it's kind of Othello style, right? You could say, hey, if you make a connection on 2 sides, then you could
turn the whole thing.
Yeah, so that could be a possibility too. I'm not sure. You'd have to play around with it and see if that would work. But
again, it's you get to try it out online before you build something.
Oh yeah, it's great. There's a ton of little fun things that you can do. So so those might be a few things to play with. All right. So, as always, we appreciate you guys listening to the show. We know that some people reached out to talk about training, help, conversations like those. So if you're interested, if you're interested in having either me or Ixchell or both of us help you develop some better ways to interact with your students or some training for your teachers, you can reach out and talk to us if you are so inclined. We're both busy, so we kind of keep that limited, but we do want to help people out who want it. So reach out. You can find us both. We're still on the socials, kind of. I guess that's a harder conversation. You can find us on diesel.org. I guess that's the easiest.
You'll find us.
Yeah.
We're findable.
If you can find this show, you can find us. So we'd love to help you out if it's something you're looking for.
All right. Another one of the tools that grabbed my attention was the typing test. And in the past, I've used typing.org because it's so well built. But as all good apps go, they went the way of there's a paid version and the free version just has way too many. It's too complicated now for the quick, I want my students to have a quick experience at typing with an English setup. And so I don't want to have to log in every time and have a whole class, et cetera, et cetera. So the typing test is a very quick way to have warm-ups, and they can type different paragraphs. There's different topics they can choose. And again, they don't need an account. And I think you can customize what they're typing. So let's say if you wanted, for example, my students who needed to take the TOEFL needed to be able to type academic words in a fast, they needed to increase their speed.
Right. So
I couldn't have them typing elementary school type paragraphs. They needed to be able to type higher level. So this is something that I would use for them. So it's just, it's easy, easy to.
Super straightforward, gets them some typing practice, a little bit of digital literacy. I like that one. This is one of those ones that I kind of blew over, and I was like, maybe I wouldn't use it. But actually now as I jump into the demo version and look at it, I can see where you would absolutely want to use it.
And I tend to use these kinds of things as it's not really a gap filler for me. It's more of like, all right, as I'm getting set up in the classroom and you're coming in, spend 10 minutes as I'm calling attendance and getting set up, doing typing warm-ups.
Yeah.
You
could also tie this to other ones too, Ixchell, because what it does when you're writing in there, it says it gives you time remaining. So how long it would take you to do the thing, your typing speed, your accuracy, and your adjusted speed, right? And so I could see maybe someone putting that into something like the leaderboards, and kind of then we're competing
How much
against each other with accuracy or how fast you're going or whatever.
Yeah, or yourself, really. If you're trying to see, yesterday you were at this, today you're at this number.
Yeah.
And you could see how, okay, today you were tired, so this is how you did on a tired day, which is why you need to take a break before you take your TOEFL exam and don't practice the day before, because that you get students who think like, if I just do 30 minutes of typing, I'll improve. No, you actually need to rest.
Right. So I'll talk about, so in connection to that, there's also one of the ones called the badge tracker, which is kind of like a custom badging, right? And so there are these really great tools, all these badging tools that are really wonderful, Badger, etc. But the problem with them is there's kind of a big learning curve on those, right? Mm-hmm. And so what I do like about the badge tracker in here is, one, you can make your own badges pretty easily and upload the images to them. But then in the spreadsheet, basically you end up with like a list of all the students' names and then the badge categories that they might have earned or not. And then on top of that, you can put a little star next to it so they can kind of get like, hey, I got the badge, or you can kind of upgrade it to like star one star with a star with 2 stars with 3 stars, and so then like mastery level.
If you reached your 100 words per minute on typing test, you could have the 1 badge, but then if you did it twice that week, you could have the one with the 1 star, and then if you done it consistently, you could have even more stars. That's cool.
Right. And you could also work it the other way around too. So I was thinking maybe like something like attendance, right? Everybody starts off with full badges, right? With 3 stars or whatever it is. And then you say, well, hey, every time you're absent, you lose a star. And so they can easily see for themselves where they are with their
punitive.
Yeah. So there are some ways to play around with that. And then again, like how you're linking these different ideas together, you could kind of see, okay, part 1 to this and then part 2. And we haven't mentioned this, Ixchell, but all of these are pretty quick, like to share out. So there's always a button on the bottom of the page where you can just get a quick link and share it out, or QR it, or drop it into your if you have your LMS announcements, or if you have a shared chat, back channel chat feature that you're using. There's lots of ways to play around with it.
All right. So the next one, you mentioned the leaderboard. So there's different, the leaderboard, the badge tracker, and then the one I like is the progress indicator. And I know that several LMSs will have something like, I know Kahoot and Socrative, I forgot how they pronounce it. They have leaderboards built in when you're playing games, but this is something that you could use for and customize for many things. So if you're one of those schools that asks students to keep track of how many pages they've read, that's a place where you could see, but you can customize it. So it could be like, okay, so this week we were focused on this vocabulary. Let's see how we're doing when we're doing our review in the morning. How well did we do? And you could do it individually. You could do it by teams. You could even do how are you feeling today? What are they called? The scales, mood charts.
Oh yeah.
Because you could see how you did throughout the day. How confident are you? You can use images. So again, a lot of stuff you can customize with it. What else might you do with the progress indicator?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a visual way of I guess I would pop it up to see how we're doing throughout the class and gauge how the class is doing, just as a way to indicate whether you need to be more focused, or, I mean, there's multiple ways of using it. I just,
yeah, so you could do things too, like I'm thinking
homework tracker.
Tracking.
How many times did you, homework tracking.
Overall score tracking. So like, let's say for example, you've got 25 students and you've got an assignment that's worth up to 4 points, right? Then you could say, hey, out of 100 points, where does our whole class fit in with these assignments, right? And so you could say, oh, we, collectively we're it would just be a visual indicator with a bar, right? But it's a nice way to kind of capture the attention too. So yeah, I think there's a lot of kind of fun ways to just kind of, sometimes it's just a question of mixing up the visuals in the class, right? Or mixing up the
Yeah.
ways that students are if you just say, hey, as a class, we all got, a 78, like, is that what you like or not? And they're like, okay, whatever. But then when they see that bar and the little gray
Mhm.
space, that's like, okay, there's still 22 more that we could have gotten, right? So,
Yeah.
so there's ways to kind of play with that. Okay, cool. So the next one up, Shell, is for me is the manipulatives one. This one is kind of the fridge magnets, I guess, is the easiest way to describe it.
Hmm.
I know a lot of teachers who have done these activities on Google Slides, right? So they make a little text box, or they make a little box, and they do the background color, and then they write
Or
the
even
text on
Padlet.
or Padlet
Yeah.
or whatever. And so
Hmm.
they kind of prep everything with one word at a time, and then they spread those all out to the side of the document, and then they're like, okay, now I'll let all the students come in and use it, right? Well, the cool thing about this one is all you need to do is cut and paste the list of the words that you want right into. You don't even have to go into a spreadsheet for this one. They just do it on the back end of Flippity. And so you just cut and paste a list of words, and then it makes a document for you that students can all log into and start moving those little words or pictures around. So you can do pictures, you can do videos if you wanted to, etc. And then the other part to it is that you can they have some background choices. So you can have different columns. So if you had kind of column 1, column 2, column 3, column 4, and then a goal or a purpose for each of those columns. So maybe you would say, if you're doing word forms, for example, you might say noun, verb, adjective, adverb, and then the students would then be responsible for moving the columns the words into the right columns. Obviously, that's the very easiest of examples, right? But if you did things like videos, maybe you could say like, hey, after we watch this video, if we're talking about themes in books, which theme do you think that this video is helping us to understand, right? And so then they could move the actual YouTube video, like a little version of it, over into the column or the Venn diagram or however you have it set up.
Very, very cool. I'm thinking right now for some of the students who I'm just thinking of exercises that some of our textbooks have are the sentence scrambles, and sometimes the students just don't seem to get it when they're doing it in the book, but because it's a manipulative, and also if it's let's say if you're using a Smartboard, they're going to be using tactile skills. What is it? Horizontally, because they're not. You know how when you write on the board, you tend to make more spelling mistakes. Mm-hmm. Because you're using a different part of your brain. So manipulating things up on a board, like on a like with magnets, it would actually maybe activate certain mnemonic. It's like a mnemonic device for students who might need that. And I'm just thinking of like students who don't get it, and you've used the magnets and they didn't get it, or you're using a little board with cards and they're sitting at their desk and they don't get it. But once they come up to the board and they're manipulating things, I don't know if you can envision that, but that's what popped into my mind right now.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. So like sometimes a student might end up stressing themselves out over the spelling of the word, and that's not really the goal of the activity. The goal is for them to figure out how the sentence structure works. And so if you're providing them with properly spelled words, and their job is to then only focus on the structural elements of that sentence, then they're not going to be distracted by like, am I spelling it right? And all the other things that could kind of essentially different parts of language learning code switching, right?
Yeah. So that's another aspect that I thought is cool. And you don't have to build anything. It's already on the website.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So the other tool that I really liked was the self-assessment. And that's because, again, I like students to constantly be thinking of their progress and see how they're doing. So this gives you a quick way to add some questions, and it's like a multiple choice test, but it's even like an exit ticket. Mm-hmm. I would use the self-assessment as an exit ticket, and that's all it is.
Yeah.
It's just quick and simple.
Yeah. And a lot of these, that's the beauty of a lot of these, is that they're all so quick and simple to
Yeah, you don't have to go into an LMS and open up their quiz builder and type in the box. It's just one page. You put it there. It's done.
Yeah, and then you kind of can just keep it in your drive or whatever too. So, last one that I want to share is the Mad Libs one, which is cool. So
Mad Libs.
Yeah, so it's kind of cool. So what you can do is you can actually build several different Mad Libs all into one activity, and then the students can choose which one they're going to do. But you would write out in a single cell. You just write out whatever the quick story or the paragraph is, and then you leave the blanks inside of there with you put them into brackets. I mean, there's just easy descriptions, and all of these are like a half-page read to figure out how to use them. But the thing I kind of liked about this one, you can always do the fun Mad Libs, of course, with students, and and just, hey, like, we're working on word forms, we're working on trying to understand these things. But I was also thinking you can use them in more advanced ways. So, for example, if you're writing kind of a traditional college essay and you're writing a thesis statement, right, you might leave the claims of the thesis statement, like what each body paragraph is supposed to be about, in blanks, right? So you might say something like, after having read the body paragraphs, you could set it up, and then they could see, like, the dumb example that I always give in class just to keep it easy is McDonald's is the best restaurant because A, B, and C, right? And then A is it's cheap, B is it's convenient, and C, it's delicious, right? And don't worry, to all of you McDonald's haters out there, it's not a serious activity, but that could be a way for students to start to see, for example, how to do some structural elements in their writing as well. Or you could do like parallelism, right? So you could kind of play around with different ways to use Mad Libs as ways to explain writing styles or composition structures or different things like that as well. So again, easy to do, easy to set up, couple clicks, and then you'd be done. The biggest time is just thinking of like what that content is, but not so very quick on the turnaround for something for students to work with.
Very cool.
So that's quite a lot of things. There's a lot more to look at. And again, as we mentioned before, we absolutely want you to share, especially your creative uses of some of these that are like, we understand the basic uses, and then we kind of want to start playing, okay, well, what are some ways I can think creatively? What are some ways that I can kind of switch this up and make it into a customized thing for my students? So if you have any ideas out there, if you're using things in here and you want to share, please reach out, leave us a message, especially on the show notes, diesel.org/75, and we would love to hear from you.
All right, it is time for our fun finds. And a colleague of mine, another supervisor, lent me a book called The New 1 Minute Manager by Ken Blanchard and Spencer Johnson. And it's, I believe it's the same guy who wrote Who Moved My Cheese. And I think this is an updated version of quick tips on how to manage a team and, how to give praise, when to redirect, and then I think they're famous for the 1 minute goals. So it's an excellent, quick read, very helpful. A lot of good advice in there.
Nice.
So
I should read that for sure. Mine goes in a different direction. Yeah,
that's okay.
Mine is Kashi. Have you ever had this cereal? Kashi's
yes,
like a brand.
Kashi. Yeah. Yes, healthy. So you're going healthy.
Yeah. So anyone who knows me knows I should probably eat healthier. But Kashi is so they've got different types of cereals or whatever. But the one that I like is this organic cinnamon harvest. It's essentially like an adult flavored frosted mini
cinnamon
wheats.
Toast. Oh, I was going to say cinnamon toast crunch.
More frosted mini wheats, less cinnamon toast crunch, because it is the like the shredded wheat little mini squares.
Fiber.
Yeah, but just a light tasting of kind of a little light cinnamon sugary sweet thing, instead of like with the frosted mini wheats, it's just like a big old glob of sugar on top of every square. Yeah. And so I was walking by the store. I found it one time and I'm like, oh, this actually kind of seems like maybe a better choice. It's organic, so maybe a little bit healthier. So I've been getting it for the last couple of weeks. And if you still have your childhood taste for frosted mini wheats, but you want something that's a little bit more grown up, this might be a good choice.
You're boring now, Brent. He's going healthy.
What is a non-boring cereal? Like what's
the regular
like
mini
Fruit
wheats?
Loops? Oh, regular frosted mini
No,
wheats?
just the regular. Yeah,
Frosted.
that's it.
That's not
Sure,
boring.
of
and
course.
Kashi is boring.
Kashi is pricey.
It is pricey, yeah. So I was actually looking at it. I'm like, it's a little bit much. So like I was like, maybe 1 week I'll do Kashi, and the next week I'll go back to frosted. Like I'll kind of trade back and forth on the cost involvement there, because I definitely agree with you there.
All right, we are on all the platforms, including Patreon. Tag us if you're leaving us a shout out.
For the show notes and other episodes, please check out diesel.org/75. That's the number 75. And you can, of course, listen to us at Voice Ed Canada. These are weird days, right, Ixchell, for Twitter? And
these are weird days. Never did I ever imagine that Twitter might break.
I know.
That's how it feels recently. Yeah. But we're still there. Yeah. Where can you find us?
So you can find the show at DIESOLPod, DIESOLPOD, and you can find me at Brent G. Warner. I'm playing more with the Mastodon. We talked about that briefly last time, but I'm also currently and this is one of the reasons one of the things I don't like about Mastodon is like I haven't locked down which server I want to be on, and so anyways, at the moment I am at MSTDN. At Brent G. Warner at mstdn.social. So it's a little longer to say than the Twitter one.
Yeah. And I'm still on Twitter, and I'm also on Mastodon and everything else, but you can find me at ixy_pixie. That's IXY_PIXY. If you find me on Twitter, you'll find me on the link to everything else.
Yeah, there you go.
In Swedish, thank you is talk. Talk for tuning in to the DIESOL podcast.
Talk, everybody.